Man, it was bad. You guys were not kidding with your one-star reviews on IMDb. And yet here was I, blithely wandering in. Oh, maybe it won't be so bad. I really did tell myself, I thought, a lot of times the popular consensus is not what I think. Plenty of underrated stuff out there. I started the Misfit sequels series for that very reason, so I thought maybe this one, with all the bad press around it, can't possibly live down to that. But the Predator series is here to constantly prove me wrong. I gotta say, I've liked the way I decided to do this, where I watch each movie, then do a review without knowing what the next one's gonna be. Because it seems to keep taunting me every time I find something that I didn't like, it finds a way to really double down on whatever it is. Bill Paxton just seems like a lifetime ago when I was complaining about his acting. Also, before we get deep into it, I want to take this opportunity to publicly apologize to Adrian Brody. I thought his tough guy voice in the previous movie was a little overdone, a little goofball. Little did I know the depths of acting we were about to get in this movie. So, Adrian, I take it back, good sir. So, this time around, of course, we're talking about The Predator. That's The Predator. Mr. Predator to you. This one was obviously trying to take home the championship for the least creative sequel title ever. Do you guys remember when Fast and Furious came out all those years ago? And the joke was, whatever happened to the? Where did it go? Well, it washed up and attached itself to this movie. And honestly, the sheer dumbness of the title should have been my first clue, but I went in with an open mind, I really did. I was hoping for something to turn me around on this, but man, we learned one thing, and that's that it can always get worse. So I'm putting my review before my retrospective, and that's just bad form. So let's start at the beginning. I did think that once again there was a pretty decent intro to the movie, as they've done in 2 and 3. They kicked off with an action-packed start, and I thought that was good. That was a moment when I was like, yeah, people are exaggerating. It's not that bad. I like that it was a kind of an expansion on the opening shot from the original movie, where you just see the alien ship go down to Earth. This time you get an alien ship that goes down to Earth, but there's more to it than that. It's obviously some kind of conflict going on. You see the Predator in his control console trying to bail out, having all these issues. And I thought, if you're going to do a reference, that's a pretty good one because it's sort of familiar, but it also gives a little more detail than before. And that sort of thing I always support going forward in sequels that are 30 years after the original. I approved. And I think that was the last time I had a smile on my face during the whole movie. Because from there, we get introduced to our beloved Boyd Holbrook as the main character, Quinn McKenna. And what prompted my apology to Adrian Brody at the start was this guy and his sheer inconsistency with whatever accent he was deciding or not deciding to do for this character, as the case may be, as the moment may be, as the scene may be. Really, just as he felt like it. Every once in a while, you would get a gem like, I'm a sniper, ma'am. Just get me up alongside him. He turns into Huckleberry Hound out of nowhere. And then back to just his regular accent because, consistency is for chumps. I just was like, pick one and stay with it. I mean, there's nothing. There's nothing in the script. There's nothing in the context clues that demands that he have a southern accent. Just drop it. If you're not good at it, just drop it. Know your limitations. But anyway, he's the one who sees the Predator ship crash, and he gets an electronic armband attached to him because it worked in Cowboys and Aliens. So here we go. That's what alien technology consists of all of a sudden. That's another one. Like, people have pretty constantly since that movie came out talked about how bad it is. And yet I conspicuously see a lot of the concepts in it repeated. It's almost like it was actually pretty good, but we'll save that for another day. That's one I'm going to do a defense of episode. But anyway, it so strongly reminded me of that movie, that specific movie, that I thought, what a weird thing to plagiarize from a movie that flopped. But what are you going to do? So he gets the armband and wanders into a little Mexican pueblo and tells the proprietor of a little restaurant to mail it to his P.O. box of his estranged wife. And like, I realize I'm an idiot, so there's probably some things here that escaped me, but why couldn't he just do it himself? Like, it was going to his house or his wife's house. I don't know. They're separated, whatever. But it was going to his family's house. So it's not as if you covered your tracks very well. And you didn't mail it to a safe house. You mailed it to where your wife and kid live. So what the hell difference does it make if you put your own name on it? Why involve this poor bastard who's probably going to get mowed down by the CIA now for being complicit in this whole whatever it is? I don't know. That was actually the second note I wrote down. Why can't you mail it? But anyways, Next up, we get his poor son, Rory Declan McKenna. And of course, if you have a child in school, you gotta have a bullying scene. So one of the bullies sets off the fire alarm. Everybody leaves except for Rory because he needs to stay so he can get picked on. And I naively thought this was going to be one of my big complaints in the movie, so I timed it. I timed the fire alarm. It goes off from 10:27 until 11:02, so that's a total of 35 seconds. What kind of a fire alarm only lasts that long? That's not even long enough to clear all the kids out of the room. But, like I say, small potatoes compared to what we've got coming up later. Next up, we meet Olivia Munn as Casey Brackett, whose backstory I think provides the single moment of charm in the whole thing. She explains that she once, as a 6-year-old girl, wrote a letter to the president about how she was very excited about animals, and that if there was ever an animal from space, that she wanted to be contacted about it. Now, all these years later, it actually happened. I honestly thought that was adorable. I thought that was such a cool backstory and funny and sweet. And if there'd been more shit like that, maybe this would have been a better movie. But the fact that we got that backstory as an explanation of what she was doing there, like step one is I'm a little girl, I write a letter. Step two, they call me when there's an extraterrestrial with nothing in between, was a little bit, shall we say, paper thin. And in the meantime, the only thing we know about her, and this is a direct quote, is that she wrote the book on evolutionary biology. Talk about a lofty claim for somebody who appears to be about 35 at this point. There was no knowledge of evolution before Dr. Casey Brackett came into the picture. So keep that in mind, kids, because it's probably a good explanation as to all the other things that happened in this movie. One of which is they have a predator under sedation in some kind of operating theater, and he gets out because, duh, starts slashing people all to pieces. He doesn't kill Dr. Brackett, though, because she's not a threat to him. Which is in keeping with some of the themes, because in the original movie, Anna didn't get killed because she was unarmed. However, Dr. Brackett immediately arms herself and starts going after the Predator, so I wonder if he had a moment of thinking to himself, shit, should have neutralized that one. Anyway, so our main hero at this point is under arrest for tampering with the US mail, I think. I really have no idea. But he's on a bus with some other. They're not convicts. They're mental patients? I don't know. They're all army. Can you tell how much attention I paid? So he's on a bus with these other idiots, and they each have a lovable quirk. One of them has Tourette's, because that's hilarious. And this is where I'll take a moment to acknowledge something and at the same time acknowledge for myself that I really am not the most qualified to talk about it. What I wrote in my notes was Asperger's and Tourette's. Let's offend everybody. Because we learn earlier on that Rory, the little boy, the main character's son, has got something like Asperger's. And I'm not going to say absolutely that's what he has, because we just hear one of the bullies say it. And what the hell do they know? It's not like that's a medical opinion. But he has something along those lines, fair enough. And then we meet Thomas Jane's character, whatever his name is. And the very first thing that anyone tells us about him is that he has Tourette's syndrome, which is treated like an absolute comedy goldmine. And very near the end of the movie, and I know this set a lot of people off, very near the end of the movie, somebody says that being on the spectrum, as you know, is the next step of human evolution. And that's why your son is so important. And like, where I fall short as a reviewer here is I don't have any medical knowledge about afflictions like this or what the people go through. I haven't seen it in my own life, so I hope that somebody out there is really qualified and will break down exactly how inaccurate and probably horribly offensive these things are in this movie. And whoever it is, I recommend you go listen to it, because I'm just a moron and I just like to watch things explode. So my reaction, my takeaway from that was, what in the world were they thinking writing this stuff? I mean, nobody is going to be happy with it that I can imagine. I mean, I don't think there are going to be very many fan letters saying, thanks so much for the positive portrayal, because the one is just outright treated like it's a joke, and the other is just handled with this outrageous lack of scientific background. And who am I to say that? I don't have any of that background either. But as effectively a bystander like I am, I think it showed amazingly poor judgment on the part of the team that put this thing together. I can't believe it made it all the way into theaters with these references intact. And I like one thing I'll say is that I think it's totally possible to make an entertaining blockbuster movie that still touches on, important issues people should be learning about. If you think all the way back to First Blood from 1982, 40 years ago already, there were a lot of people who didn't have any grasp of post traumatic stress, what that was, how it was affecting people. That movie came out and was able to shine a light on it. And Sylvester Stallone has said that veterans came up to him afterwards and wanted to thank him for so sensitively showing what they had gone through and making it understandable to regular folks just coming to the theater who would have had no understanding of it beforehand. And what a positive thing that had been for them. And I consider that a great movie that has that message and is still, at the end of the day, an entertaining action movie. So, yeah, it's absolutely possible to do that, but it does take real talent to accomplish something like that, and tonight's feature didn't even bother. So I won't stay on this soapbox for the whole episode. I just wanted to say that I cannot believe they did that. And those of you who took offense to it, I think you have every right to that. And here's the real kicker. So they wrote this character for Thomas Jane, who is just one note, and it's a stupid, irritating, offensive note, and he's not even the annoying one, because that honor gets kind of shared democratically, honestly, amongst this group of guys. There's Trevante Rhodes' character. Now, his major contribution is that he grunts agreement with our hero anytime he says anything. Alfie Allen does nothing at all other than demonstrate the fact that he can do an Irish accent, which is probably his way of saying, get me out of here, cast me in something better. And of course, we have Keegan Michael Key, the comedian from Key and Peele. Now, while one half of that duo, Jordan Peele, is off directing critically acclaimed horror movies one right after the other and becoming the new host of The Twilight Zone, poor Keegan is left over here telling Your Mother jokes in a Predator sequel. And I know that when they were writing the script, they thought this character is going to be the equivalent of Hawkins in the original. But Hawkins gets 2 jokes in Predator. They're both dumb, but they're both over in like a second. They do not leave this lingering aftertaste of all these god awful one liners from Key's character. It's like I almost understand what they were going for, which is like the humor of a 12-year-old middle school boy, the ideal audience for Predator. But even when I was one of those, I still would have thought these were just embarrassingly stupid and pandering and lazy and just unspeakably bad. So yeah, don't ever compare this character to Hawkins. Hawkins is a saint. And leaving our friends in the bus for a moment, I wrote down a note that turned out to be something of a prophecy because it keeps coming up in this movie. I wrote down, it's bulletproof? Because when the creature is escaping from the lab, like it has no armor on because they stripped all that away so they could do the autopsy on it or whatever, the research, I don't know. They were poking around. So it has none of its tools around, just its bare hands to get out of there with. And it's a military installation. So guys are standing there with their rifles and whatever and firing point blank at this thing right in the gut and nothing happens. Like they don't even bounce right off of it. It's basically like they fire the bullets and they disappear before they even get to him because that's how ineffectual they are. Now, isn't the whole point of the Predator the fact that it can get wounded? I mean, if it bleeds, we can kill it. You remember that classic line from the original movie that this is a sequel to? I mean, instead it's like he's just a walking suit of armor, or worse, he's a bullet repellent machine. Following the rules of logic, he would have been killed right there in the lab, and that's the end of the movie. So, and all you have to do is make a little change. Just make it a hospital instead of a military place, and then there wouldn't be armed guards or whatever, and he could escape no problem. And then you don't have to deal with this incredibly awkward concept that he suddenly became invulnerable to gunfire, which goes against everything that makes this series cool. And I wrote that down because I was like, wait a minute. Are we going to learn that, he had invisible armor on or something? But no, it's just incredible laziness on the parts of the filmmakers. He doesn't get hurt until it's important to the story for him to get hurt. And that drove me right up the wall the more they kept doing it. And honestly, speaking of things that there were too much of, I guess this is the moment to talk about Predator dogs. If you recall, if you had the patience to to get this far, and listened to my previous episode about predators, I might have mentioned that I thought the predator dogs were stupid because they're just dogs. You know, it's an alien species. It could have any other life form you can imagine. Why have a thing that's blatantly just a stupid dog? Well, they obviously took my comments to heart on that and decided to emphasize the shit out of these stupid dogs. And one of them, naturally enough, even gets basically a starring role, and he becomes the team's pet because he got shot in the head, but not killed. So now he's got, alien dog dementia, and he's been turned into a Cocker Spaniel. Isn't that cute, boys and girls? So Olivia Munn, getting back on track, she does make it out of the science lab and onto the top of the prison bus in a scene that, if I may, causes me to make another slight diversion. Now, the director of this movie, Shane Black, I promise I'll talk more about him. I know from my Dirty Harry 5 DVD movie collection that he's a big fan of the movie Dirty Harry. So it came as no surprise at all to me when he managed to work in a scene where his main character jumps off the roof of something onto the top of a moving bus. Prison bus, not a school bus, so it's not plagiarism. But yeah, I couldn't help but notice what a blatant homage that was. Let me be generous and not call it something rude, like a ripoff. And it's followed by a scene that I really think they should start showing in film class because it's got a demonstration of everything you should avoid doing. And that's the scene when she wakes up in the hotel room surrounded by the guys who go out of their way to make it as jarring an experience for her as possible, which I know is supposed to be funny, but it's not. So we're going to move ahead like that was never the intention because we got to work with what we have here. I mean, it's bad enough that fucking joke about how she goes to grab the gun. Two of the guys go, "Oh, I told you she would grab the gun. You owe me $5." The fucking that joke, the making underhanded bets while something is happening joke. It's been played out since the beginning of time. Never was funny. It's embarrassing. Stop it. And then the absolute highlight. Well, no, I shouldn't skip Thomas Jane because he gets his moment to shine here, which is when he can't stop saying pussy in front of this girl. Because, like I said, people with diseases, we love to laugh at them. So that's his thing. The stupid Tourette's joke, the stupid I told you so jokes. But the absolute worst thing is when she does grab the gun to defend herself against all these creeps. And our hero, the guy who, we've been constantly told is such a model citizen, and I'll get into that in just a sec. But anyway, he's supposed to be our shining beacon of righteousness. And his way of dealing with that is to slowly walk up to her, grab the gun, and say, "It's okay." And then say, "It's okay," and then say it 25 fucking times, while also trying to yank the gun out of her hands. Because nothing makes somebody feel more assured than that. I can tell you from experience. What in the hell is that? Who wrote that? Like, he could have so easily just had a speech where he explained the situation to her. We're not here to hurt you. We're in the same boat as you. If you don't believe me, take the gun. If you don't believe me, walk out that door. If you don't trust us, it's so on. But instead, his heroic action is to walk up to her, try to take her weapon, and he has only one thing to say, which is, "It's okay." Because that should be enough. I mean, what the hell? He said it was okay. Why is that not getting through to you? It's like this movie was written by aliens and not just about them. Like people with no grasp of how a human being would behave. And I think it just would have been so easy in that scene to write it just a little bit better. And then, it would show the good sides of these characters in how they treat someone who's helpless and confused. And no, we need to have stupid jokes and people acting like idiots because that's what we enjoy. I'm starting to think I might be the wrong audience for this. But anyway, she is in fact convinced in a relatively short span of time, I would say about a minute, because after all, it's not like she needs to be any smarter than anyone else. She just wrote the book on evolutionary biology. That's right, Erasmus Darwin, you can go to hell. That's my science joke, so I can disguise myself as a smart person. But anyway, talking about that reminded me of the upcoming thing, which is where they finally go back to Quinn's house. Now, Quinn's the hero, the one with the estranged wife and the kid, who doesn't understand that you can just mail things under your own name. And we get a scene where his wife, who hates him now, kindly explains for us that he's basically the greatest American hero that ever lived. He's got 17 Purple Hearts, and he was the lone survivor of all these incursions in Afghanistan. And he's, if the American flag was a human being, it would be this dude. And all this spelled out for us by the one character in the movie that supposedly doesn't like him. So, the old adage that in a story you should show and not tell is obviously bullshit. You should have a character who never did anything in the story show up to tell you how much you should like your main character, because that saves us having to have him prove it with his actions. A plus for storytelling. I always loved the original Predator movie from 1987, the one that started me on this journey. But I feel like I never had the proper appreciation for how they handled Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in that movie Dutch. Because it really is subtle. It really is very subtly and cleverly done. One thing he says about himself at the very beginning is that he's not an assassin. Later on, he gets angry when he finds out that his people were put in danger for a reason that goes against his beliefs. And then at the very end, when he has the Predator at his mercy, he decides not to pursue fighting him anymore because he's helpless, and that's not something a hero would do. It's absolutely brilliant the way they handled that. And I just keep gaining so much more appreciation for how it was done the more I see people failing at it, you know? This movie does raise an interesting philosophical question for me, and that is aliens who can speak English, like at the end of Predator 2, or aliens that speak their own language and we have to read the subtitles. Which one is dumber? Because their solution this time around was to just have them make, little clicking and growling noises, and then we get a printout. And I thought I couldn't be any more bothered than when that one said "take it" at the end of the second one. But it turns out it's not any better to have them speak their own language and then we have to read it. So I don't know what I wanted out of life, but somehow it wasn't this. And I'll tell you what else I didn't want. For them to make a compromise and have them be able to speak English by means of a translator device. Now, I don't know because I think I blacked out through a lot of this, so I have no idea whether they set up that such a thing existed. But as far as I know, the moment it started using it was the first moment we had been told that there is such a thing. So the army's got some truck that has a big plasma screen that'll show you a readout and a countdown timer because you might need that. So it'll show you a readout of what the predator's saying while he speaks into something, and it translates what he's saying, broadcasts it in English, and and then when he makes his point that the humans don't have long to live, it very kindly puts out a little readout that shows that there's 7 minutes and counting until he decides to blow them all up. And I just I've never seen an alien that was hell bent on human destruction be so considerate, really, with his demands or with his presentation of his demands. He really deserves some credit for that. So they do finally have a shootout with the alien between the alien and the army guys, and I can't confirm whether it was a good action scene. Honestly, I was checking my emails at the time. But of the two actually good things in the script, one of them happens at this point, and that is when the two guys who we learn have become friends through an unlikely series of events that began with them accidentally shooting each other. They both get grievously, mortally wounded, but they're in sight of each other. So, at the count of three, they decide that they'll shoot and kill each other, and that way they'll die together and then won't be in pain anymore. And that, if that had been in a totally different film, I think it would have been a wonderful little emotional moment for characters that we've gotten to know all this time. And, even my little heartstrings got tugged on a little bit. I thought, well, that's nice. But nothing had built up to it. So it was an isolated good idea in this movie. And I, I'm trying to be as honest as I can with these reviews. So I have to say I thought that was a good thing. And it's followed by the Predator getting away and taking off in his spaceship. And at that point, more things happen that made my skin crawl. One of them is when two of the guys are about to jump and getting themselves mentally prepared to do that, and one of them pushes the other. So he just goes falling through space and lands on this rising spaceship that we don't know what is made of, but I I wish he had just died. I wish he had just gone splat on top of the thing and exploded into a million meaty bits because I hate that trope so much. I hate that one of them's not ready, the other one shoves him and he falls. Maybe it's because I had an older brother, but I don't do that. Don't do that in real life, and don't include it in your script because you think it's really funny. Number one, it's been done. It's weirdly cruel for a character who's supposed to be heroic, and I just would like it to die, please. Next up, we have the bubble wrap force field, which I'm going to give him a half point for, because I have to admit I think it's the first time in a movie I've seen somebody on a spaceship that has a force field. I mean, that's a really common idea to see in science fiction, but I think this is the first time I've ever seen one that actually people can touch and physically interact with. So, I'm giving them a half point for that because we're like an hour and a half into the movie and it's the first unique thing I've seen. And I'm going to take half a point away because it looked exactly like bubble wrap and somehow I didn't find that very intimidating. I don't know, maybe I'm weird. And also, I think a whole point gets subtracted at this point because I was so forcefully reminded of an MCU film at this point. Like, I've actually enjoyed some of the stuff from Marvel, but they have this tendency to have the climax of the movie be that the hero basically has to get on board some flying object and put some other thing into a tape deck, and that's what saves the day. And it really doesn't matter what these things are, they're interchangeable, just as long as you get there and put the right thing into the right slot. And there's probably something very Freudian about that. Don't know. Moving on. But yeah, this one so closely copied that I was like, oh wait, I think I fell asleep and this is Thor: The Dark World now or something. I don't know if they do that specifically in that movie, but it is an easy target, so take that. But actually, I do know exactly where they got the idea for the Iron Man suit that they use at the end, and honestly, the clue is kind of in the name. But yeah, if you didn't know, they literally finish the movie. The very last shot of the movie is that they discover some technology left behind by the Predators. And this is where the electrical armband thing finally gets some payoff. So it shoots out of the thing, grabs onto a guy's arm, and then does that piecemeal assembly thing that the Iron Man suit does when it like builds itself on top of you, but does it in like 3 seconds. And it's literally a superhero Iron Man costume, but this time it's got the Predator helmet and the things hanging off of it. So, points for creativity all around. I cannot believe that somebody thought that was a strong enough conclusion for this movie. It's also the most egregious ripoff I think I've ever seen in my whole life. I saw someone describe it as a sequel bait ending, but from where I'm sitting, I cannot see what their idea was to do a sequel based on that. What the humans are going to suit up in predator costumes and fight them? I guess somebody would pay to see that. Me, so I could do a review on it, but regular sane folks, no, I just don't see it. And honestly, the fact that this movie even got made is a miracle because multiple eyes had to look over the script and multiple people had to put the stamp of approval on it. Actors had to show up and say these godforsaken lines. So yeah, like I was saying, you guys were not kidding, those of you who warned me to stay away from this, but I did it. I jumped in head first because I really did think, maybe it'll be a Misfit sequel. Maybe it'll be one of those things that gets a lot of dislike when it first comes out, and later on, after the dust settles, we find out that it did have something to it. Because there have been a few of those, and I've been their defender, and I wanted to be fair, and so this is me being fair. It sucks. This is a bad movie. This is 1 out of 10 for sure. Um, I've already told you what the redeeming qualities were. There were two scenes. One was a line, and one was when the guys kill each other, and that's it. That is it. Everything else is a waste of your time. And to close with, I did promise I would talk more about Shane Black, the guy who wrote and directed this movie. Now, I've always held Shane in a certain regard because very early in his career, he wrote the script for Lethal Weapon, the 1987 original, which I consider one of the best action movies ever made, easily in the top five. I mean, the performances are unbelievably great. The script is absolutely watertight. I mean, everything in it has its proper place. It all works out. Everything that's set up is paid off, and the action is great. The leaping off rooftops, the chasing people down Hollywood Boulevard, the car that smashes into a Christmas tree. All of it's just wonderful. It's such a great movie. And that script, like I've been saying, it's absolutely a gold standard of writing, of storytelling. And so it mystifies me every time I watch something by the same writer and don't like it, which I've done several times now. I watched The Nice Guys. I watched some scenes from it. I have to admit, I didn't sit through the whole thing, but I thought it was just insufferable. I thought the jokes were bad. I have seen Iron Man 3, which he wrote and directed, and I thought it sort of had its highlights, but was pretty generic, pretty forgettable. I watched The Last Boy Scout recently, which I was looking forward to because people always say great things about, and I thought it was terrible. And not only was it terrible, but it was kind of a copy and paste job from his script for Lethal Weapon. So it makes me wonder whether like a genie granted him a wish to be able to write one truly great screenplay and then all the others are duds or something, because the guy's obviously got talent. Or did just that one time and hasn't been able to equal it since. And I've made it this far and I haven't even mentioned a trivia fact that I think everyone should know, which is that he played Hawkins in the original Predator. He was the guy with the big glasses and the comic books and the stupid jokes, and he gets killed right away in the beginning. But before his career as a writer director, he played that fairly small role in the original movie, which is why when it was announced that he was going to be doing this one, I remember that there was a lot of excitement around it because they were like, "Oh yeah, if one person can do it right, he's definitely the one." He was there from the very beginning and played a memorable character in the first one. He really understands this material. And that perception quickly fell away when the movie came out. It's almost like he's the person who least understands what he's doing on this one. I mean, 2 and 3 were certainly not anything to brag about, but it's a disgrace. It's like if you made a dare with somebody to come up with the worst possible ideas for a sequel to something. And here it is in the flesh. It's unbelievable that this didn't go through some kind of revision by the time it was put to film. I don't know what to say about it, except that I think we really and truly have hit rock bottom with this series. And so it's with some faint hope that I go into the concluding chapter for the next episode. We're going to talk about Prey. And, my faith in this series has yet to be rewarded. So I just hope this one really blows me away. And I can come to you next time and say it was a revelation. It was the best thing since Predator, which is, what we're aiming for here, after all. So I slightly have my hopes up, but this is quite a thing to have to recover from. So if you've stuck it out this far, join me next time when we talk about 2022's Prey.